Hi, I'm Gary Striegler. Welcome to this presentation of the virtual trade show. This presentation is going to be on staircase construction. Now that is a really broad topic, and anytime that I teach on stairway construction, the first thing that I want to say is, there's lots of things that can happen that can get you in trouble on stairways, which is why it's an important subject, but you have to be compliant with the code, and sometimes different locales interpret the code differently. As a matter of fact, where I live, there's actually several different interpretations of some things like the spacing on the balusters on a stair. So my number one piece of advice to anybody is make sure that if you have any question at all, call your local building inspector and just double check. I do it all the time. I've never known a building inspector who wasn't happy to just let you call them and give you the information, because they don't want you tearing it out. So I always want to start out with that, check with the local inspector. Now, the thing that we want to do to begin with, and my apologies to those of you who are really seasoned pros, but I want to start out with a discussion about the parts of a staircase. And we're talking about a very traditional staircase. This staircase has treads and risers. Sometimes you'll see a stairway where it has kind of a little knee wall that goes down and the balusters come off that. But this is the most traditional and also the most challenging type of stairway to build. So that's what I want to talk about. So I've already mentioned one of the parts of the stair, which is the treads. Now, sometimes you also have some little caps that go on the end that simulate a stair tread, but I really like to, and I would encourage anybody, if you possibly can, use the solid treads. But you want to have, even if there's going to be carpet over here on the steps, you want to have something that's wood here to attach your balusters to. And the other option of that, of course, is that knee wall, but we're going to talk about this type. Now, the second part of the stair that I want to talk about that's really, really important is the newel post. And the newel post is kind of like the spine or the backbone of the staircase. And I've got three different types here. Now, this is just a ball top, kind of a square newel. Now, there's also box newels, which are more paneled. And I don't have an example of that, but you can certainly Google that and see. But this is just a pretty straight with a ball top. This is a turn newel that has a pin top. And parts of the stairs called fittings would fit down top of that pin top. Now, I've also got another one here. This is slightly different. It's turned, but it does have a flat spot here. And this flat spot is what your handrail would die into. So one of the things we're going to talk about later on, and when we start actually putting this all together, is how do you determine the heights and the locations for these newel posts. So again, this is a different type. When your railing is going from post to post and fitting into something like this or into something like this, that's called a post to post application. When you start out using fittings, which is what I want to talk a lot about today, if you can imagine being able to start at one part of the stairway and put your hand on top of the rail and just run the whole length of the stairway without lifting your hand off the rail, that is an over-the-top or a continuous handrail. Personally, I think that's the best looking way to do it. It's also the most trouble. So, hey, after all, if it's the most trouble, it's got to be the right thing to do, right? Okay, I'm going to stick this back out of the way. Now, one thing that I would want you to be aware of, even if you're going post to post, and again, this is where I live, how they interpret the code. If this was a great big long run of stairs, you could not have a newel post in the middle and be going from post to post. You have to be able to start from the first step that you take until you either get to the top of the stairs or hit a landing. And then you can, basically, whether it be if you hit a post like this and lift your hand off. But you cannot have, and again, I think this is most United States different, you cannot have an intermediate post in there. There are also some things about how long, say, across a landing, how far you could go between posts. I believe the code today basically says that the handrail has to be able to withstand 250 pounds of force. Now, I'm not exactly sure how you test that, but trust me, you don't want to be in question. You want rock solid Newel posts. And I've actually gotten jobs because people liked how sturdy and how strong my staircases were. And by the way, they didn't squeak either. All right, well, let's get back to it. So we have the Newel post, which is kind of the backbone of the stairway. And then you have the railing, which runs, between the posts. It's the part you put your hand on. Now, you also want to make sure that you have what's called a grippable rail. And if you look at this, it's got this recess my hand can fit around it. For instance, a flat 2x4 is not a grippable rail. They've also changed the codes. It's been a few years back. Where I live, I believe it's 2 5/8 is as wide as this can be on the top. If you look at historical pictures of old houses, sometimes they had handrails that were like 3.5, 4 inches wide, which really looks impressive. It's just not really actually practical for you to grab a hold of that handrail and help yourself up the stairs. So we've got the Newel post, we've got treads. Now, by the way, these are the risers. Part of, and what works in conjunction with the railing, are things called fittings. For instance, this fitting is what's going to start on top of this Newel post, and it's going to transition into the straight run of the railing. You see, it's got this hole in the bottom, and in just a minute, I'm going to show you how you make this cut. In other words, how do you determine where to cut this so that the railing intersects it and stays running in the same plane as these stair treads? So, practically speaking, the other part of a stairway, now there's some things called like skirt boards, and there would normally be a skirt board over there at the drywall. So there's some trim things, but really balusters are the other part. And balusters are pretty much 4 different types. This is what we call a pin top baluster, and for it, you're going to drill a hole up into the bottom of the railing, and when it fits up in there and snug, that's what mounts that. Now, this is an iron baluster, and these are pretty popular right now. It has a round turned top, and that's so that you can also drill a hole up into the bottom. And then square on the bottom, and I don't know if I've got it or not, but if I was using this iron baluster here, we would drill a hole down in here, and there would be a little shoe that would sit down on top of it to cover up that hole at the bottom. Generally speaking, you want to use a quick setting epoxy down here to hold this in place, and then what I usually use is construction adhesive on top. So these have been really popular for a long time, but they're kind of starting to go away. Depends on where you live. So actually what's getting to be real popular are just some plain old square balusters, kind of that craftsman look. And when you use a square baluster, you're going to want to use a different type of railing. I also believe, I'm going to step out of the frame for just a second and grab one of these. So this is a square top baluster, and whether you're using the totally square baluster or you're using one like this, they have to go into a piece of railing that's been plowed. Now this is actually a smaller piece of railing, but hopefully you can see it's got basically a big dado out of the bottom. Now if you want to use that big of a baluster, there are some other profiles of railing which are still grippable on the top, but they're wider at the bottom, some are a little bit bigger top, but they have a bigger dado. Now, the way that this would work, you would cut your baluster on an angle, and it would fit in this groove, and then you have a little thin piece of wood called a fillet that you just, if the baluster was right here, then you put a little flat fillet piece in between them and the next baluster, so that fillet locks it in. I don't do a lot of those, but I wanted to kind of talk about it just a little bit here at the start. Okay, so those are kind of the general parts of the stairs. You've got the treads, the risers, the Newel post, the rail, the fittings. Let me just show you real quick a couple other fittings. This one is a volute. And this volute would start, you'd have a round stair and it'd start down here, a little bit fancier. This is one of the most basic ones. Is called a tandem cap. And this would be like if you had a horizontal run of stairs and you need to go post to post over the top. And then this piece is called an up easing. And a lot of times, although these aren't the same profile, actually they are the same profile, you'll have a cap with an up easing attached, and that is basically what we've got here to start, except this just has the cap on the end. Anyway, lots of different types of fittings. Okay, so just real quickly, some things about code. So stairs are all about rise and run. In other words, how far do I go up and how far do I come this direction? These treads are 11.5 inches wide, but my run isn't 11.5 inches. My run is actually the amount, if I put this square right here, from here out, which is 10 inches. The rise on this stair is 7.5. Again, you just need to make sure that you get with whoever your code person is. Where I live, they'll let you come up actually almost to 7 7/8. But that's how you figure the rise and run. Now, some code things. Once you start on a run of stairs like this, you have to be no more than 1/4 of an inch overall difference in the rise. Again, that's where I live. And that doesn't mean 1/4 inch difference between this one and the next. That means if you measured all of them, that rise would have to be within 1/4 of an inch. And that's something that's really important that you want to check that for sure. Now, of course, these need to be level when they're installed. By the way, just super quick going to cover, when I set these stair treads, I set them with construction adhesive. Construction adhesive is your best friend when you're installing anything like a stair tread because it's going to stop squeaks. I actually use some trim head screws. I think I've got a trim head screw. You're probably not going to miss it, but we actually just use trim head screws, lots of construction adhesive. And then if that rough stair carriage was out of level, we would use these shims. I put glue on both sides of that shim, run the screw through to keep it level. Now, of course, this stair, wasn't installed permanently, but if I was installing this permanently, there'd be construction adhesive underneath it, and I would have used yellow glue at the point where the tread meets the riser. There would be a little bit of construction adhesive on the top of the riser, tiny bit where the tread sits into it. So when you put all that together, basically you're building just a box beam. Now, let's talk a little bit about how do we determine where the Newel posts go. Because when I get ready to start installing the stairs, after I put my treads in, I've got to figure out where the Newel posts are going to go. Now, my apologies. So many times when I'm teaching, I think about something else I should have shared, and I back up a minute. When I was talking about the difference in the rise on these treads, if I go up and I hit a landing, I actually get to start over. So say all these were 7.5, and I came up and I hit a landing and turned a different direction, even though they just hit landing and started going up again, I could go to a different rise. But one of the other things that can kind of get you in trouble, you always want to make sure you can take into consideration when you're figuring this out is what's going to be the finished floor down here. Because if I went back and add 3/4 inch hardwood, on top of this, my slab or my subfloor, all of a sudden that first step's not 7.5 anymore. So I actually need to take that in consideration, and take in consideration what the floor is going to be on any landing, and then what's the finished floor at the top. So all that's really important. Okay. So when you're figuring out locations for Newel posts, the thing you have to remember is the center of the Newel post is the center of the handrail, is the center of where all the balusters go. And for this, I ended up going back in 2 inches. Now, I do want to talk real quickly. I think the best way to mount a newel post is with really long screws. I've notched this and I put construction adhesive behind it. So this newel post would sit right here. I'd put a lot of construction adhesive behind it. I've drilled these 1/2 inch holes about 3/8 of an inch deep, and then I've drilled a small pilot hole behind that so that this long screw can run in here, and then I just plug that with a plug that I made with a plug cutter like this. This plug cutter will let me make a little wooden plug that matches that. All right, so real quick, I'm just going to screw this in place. I may only put a couple screws in. And I would have construction adhesive behind this. So one of the things I want to make sure of is that this is plumbed up. So I'm going to check the plumb this way, and after I install it, I'd also check the plumb this way. If I had to put just a tiny shim or something behind that, I would do that to make sure it's plumbed up. But I've already had this in here once, so it should be pretty close. And I can use just a tiny torpedo level action on this if I need to. Okay, so I would actually put 4 screws in there. Again, lots of construction adhesive. Now, here's one thought. How do I know how high to set this newel post? If this is on a landing where I live, I can get by with this railing that comes into it being 36 inches, but in a lot of the country, this has got to be 42. But so there's not really any leeway on where this post goes, especially if you have a post like this, okay? Now, even if you're doing post to post, so you say, you know, I don't have that fitting down there, but where this is locked in at where it goes, if this is coming up like this, you may have to take like an up easing like this, attach it to the rail to gain height, and then miter and put a horizontal piece to get to this post. Because if this is running along, it may hit here, somewhere here, and then I've got to come up and get into that. And even if you're doing post to post, you still need to know how to do fittings. All right. So I'm going to try and real quickly show you how you make fittings work. So here's this fitting. How do I know what to make that cut? Well, if you remember, I said that this is 10 inches of run on this and 7.5 inches. This block of wood is 10 inches on this side, 7.5. This is called a pitch block. The way that I can determine the angle I need to cut is I put this fitting on a flat surface, I run this block underneath, and what I'm looking for is just the point where this angle barely hits. Once I mark that on the bottom of my fitting, I turn the block like this, set this angle around the side, and I make a pencil mark. Now, I'd actually done that previously on this, and I just tack this back together. Hope I can get it out. So that's cut on the right angle. Now, I've got these headless pins stuck in here. I'm going to see if I can work them out real quick. How do you make that joint where you actually how do I attach this to a piece of straight rail? You do that using a rail bolt. And if you look, you can see that I have a hole drilled in this already. I'm working hard trying to get those headless pins out. And this is a rail bolt. It's wood thread on this side and machine thread on that side. And I've drilled a 1/4 inch hole up in here. What I use to line out these the locations of these rail bolts, so that comes up, it's up from the bottom 1 inch and centered. The best thing in the world to use to do that is an old-fashioned doweling jig. I can literally set it. There's a center mark on the doweling jig. That lets me drill my hole in. Now, on the straight piece of rail, I've drilled a 1 inch, and that's important, hole right there. And then I came in with a 1/2 inch hole. And this hole was located with the doweling jig also. This comes back, and the instructions should be on these, but it's 1.5 inches back. So I'm going to take this in real quick. And I may need some help. Nathan, if you can find somewhere around the shop here, I put my my nail clippers. They might be over there. Nathan may help me here for just a second. Look up in the upper part of the shop and see if you can see them. Okay, so now I've got this my rail bolt in there all the way up to where the wood threads stop. Dale Nathan has retrieved my pair of nippers. Thank you. And I had to put some. The only way I could think of to show that would be to have those headless pins in. Now, I would definitely put some glue in this if I was putting it together permanently. This little washer comes with a lot of rail bolts, and then there's a nut. So what I'm going to do, Nathan, why don't you step back in for just a second. Help me. Hold that. So we're going to raise that end up some. I'm going to slip this little washer in. And this is great if you've got one of these wrenches. It has a little magnet on the end. And so I just put that in there. And hopefully I can start out with my finger. Maybe I can just get that. Oh, have it for a minute. That's why I want to get some help. Once you start this, it can be kind of a tedious project. Try it again. Especially if you're in a hurry. This time, Nathan, raise that way up high. Let's see, maybe if I can just get in there with my finger instead of that. It's really fighting me with the wrench. Okay, so now I just got my finger on that. As long as I don't get it cross-threaded, I'll be okay. Okay, now one of the things, and again, I would have glue in this. This wrench has a lot of little points to where I can make a lot of little turns. You know, I can make short turns. I'm actually going to take a pencil, eraser on a pencil, and try and spin that nut as close as I can. Then we're going to tighten it down. Now I know I'm getting close on my time. I just want to show how this goes together. So one of the things I've shared too is, you know, you can always guess, but most of the time about 34 to 38 degrees is the pitch. So this fits on top now. We've got that now. One of the things, some of the locations where I live, they will let you do 2 balusters per tread and some 3. So we're going to just do a layout for 2. And what you have to figure is if you'll measure the width of both of these together and then subtract that from 10 inches, to whatever's left. In this instance, I think I had 7.5. So would that be 3 3/4 is the spacing I need to have in between these. So I know that the center of my newel post is right here. I actually made this little jig. It's a really simple little jig with an end cap, and it just fits right over the end of my stairs like that, and I can mark the location of each one of my balusters. Now, if I can find my drill bit. So, oh, here it is, thank goodness. So this is a 1/4 inch drill bit, and what I would do, again, I've laid out the location of all those down there. And I like to use a product called a dowel screw, which is the strongest way I know of to attach. It's wood threads on both ends. You can use this driver and just drive that wood thread in there. And then here on the tread itself, I'm just going to drill in. I drill that 1/4-inch hole in. Now I'm going to real quick just demonstrate how this dowel driver would work. On some of them, I put them in the end, but you can also, I've got one here. Okay. Nathan, see if you can find, there's a pile of those dowel screws. So, again, these are cut different lengths. One will go here, one will go there. Excuse me, that's not, here we go. One will go here, one will go there. This would twist in. Sometimes it's easier just to drive that in though. But once I've laid all these out, now this is the important part for me, I'm going to take a torpedo level, I'm going to take a laser plumb bob, and I'm going to get right over that hole, and I'm going to mark each of these up to the bottom of the rail. So I've located the locations on the treads, I've drilled that 1/4-inch hole, and then I'm going to mark it up here. Now, there are things you can use to drill that hole. To be honest, what I generally do is just get a really brand new paddle bit and just drill that hole straight up into there. I know I'm running out of time, but hopefully you can see how you locate where your baluster is going to go here. Again, you space them out based on the numbers. Now they're also, these are just a tapering pin top baluster, but there are also some that have, these are actually set up where you can trim different amounts down here, and that's a nice look also. So getting really close to the end of the time, just to kind of go back and recap some of the things. Boy, make sure you get all the parts solid when you're putting everything together. Remember that the most important thing you've got to figure out is where's the center line of your handrail, and that's going to be the center line of where all the balusters go, and that's also going to be the center line of the newel posts. Construction adhesive is one of your best friends that you can possibly have, and again, the best way that I know of to attach, if it's any kind of a wooden baluster, use these dowel screws, which we're having a hard time finding. I may, while I'm talking, see if I can take a second and back this one out real quick, and so you can see what it looks like and run one in. Of course, it's a lot easier running it in with that dowel driver. Here we go. They also make a little driver that will fit in your drill for doing the rail bolts also. Okay, let's get this in here. So, one of the great parts about doing it here is that it, instead of having to hold this baluster square, I can do that. One other quick thing I want to show you, how did I get this hole? They actually make these little cups that fit right over the end and drill it. So there really are some neat tools that you can use. One other quick thing, we've notched all these newel posts to put them in, but there's also some products. This is a product that's basically a really big version of the rail bolt that you can use if you hit plenty of lumber. This one is called, well, just a big bolt, but anyway. All right, well, I'm pretty sure I'm hard up against my 30-minute time. And how am I doing, Nathan?
29 minutes.
29 minutes. All right, fantastic. Well, so there is going to be a question and answer session after this. So hopefully, if I've forgotten something, we might be able to hit that. But these are kind of some of the basics of putting together a traditional staircase, and gives you some of the information about the parts, how do you order them, and all those things. So again, thank you very much for taking time out of your day to watch this presentation of the virtual trade show.